Welcome to the See the Light, Yes You Can Draw special Christmas lesson. I'm so glad you joined me here because this is a really special time of year, Christmas, and we're going to do a special Christmas lesson together. Okay, so before we get started, I'm Pat Knepley. I'm your master artist. I'm here today to help you do a really special Christmas card because during the Christmas time, the celebration of the birth of Jesus, our tradition is to send Christmas cards to those that we really love and care for and to give them greetings about the good news of the birth of Jesus. So the drawing we're going to do today, you can use as a really special Christmas card. Now, let's go over what you're going to need for today's lesson. You'll need a piece of paper. 9 by 12 is a great size, but not white. Try to get a light colored piece of paper. You can find some pastel papers. You'll need a set of colored pencils. Now, you have to make sure that there's some gray or some brown and a white pencil in your color pencil set. A standard regular pencil like you use at school or at home, and a really great eraser. My favorite is the kneaded eraser. Now, some special tools I would like you to try to have for this lesson are some fluorescent color pencils and a little black light. Now, not everyone has a black light. That's kind of hard to find, not something you have every day. But you can get a little black light if you visit our See the Light website. In fact, the web address is right here at the bottom of the screen. And you can ask Mom or Dad if you can purchase a small black light from our website. But if you don't have fluorescent pencils or a black light, you're still going to come out with a really great drawing that you can use as a card for someone special. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. You know, the story in the Bible tells us that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were in the town of Bethlehem. The night that Jesus was born is called Nativity. In fact, there's some really amazing, famous artwork. So let's take a look at some. The first is by an artist named Lorenzo Lotto. In this painting, you'll see that Joseph and Mary are staring down in awe at their beautiful baby boy. This particular painting is depicting daytime. The next nativity painting is by an artist named Barocci. You'll see that Mary is looking down at her beautiful baby boy, while Joseph, as he points to the baby, welcomes the neighbors in to see his amazing son. Look at the light that emanates from the beautiful infant Christ child. Now, this painting is one of my favorites, and it's by a lesser-known artist named von Hansthorst. Why I love this painting so much is you can see Mary looking down in awe. She is lit up because of the light that comes from Jesus. Do you remember, if you were part of our club meetings, we talked about value. Notice how von Hansthorst uses very dark values of the background, practically black, against the very well-lit robes that Mary's wearing and the infant Jesus in the manger. That strong contrast of dark against light provides focus and impact. Okay, so what you just saw were some nativity scenes. That word nativity comes from the Latin word natal, which is where we get words like nation or native, and it means birth. Here's a nativity scene right here. Perhaps you have one in your home or your school, or you've seen it at a local church. It simply means that night that Jesus was born, with Joseph, Mary, and the infant Jesus in the manger. We're going to be doing a Christmas card, but rather than focus on the Holy Family of Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, we're going to focus in on some others that were there that night when Jesus was born, the animals in the stable. So, you're going to have 3 animals and the Christ child in the manger. And in order to get started, we're going to focus on shape. Now, if you've been with me before, you know that line and shape are the key elements that make up any drawing. And so when you get intimidated or scared about starting a drawing, oh, I can't do that, it's too difficult, you can draw if you focus on line and shape. So to start, we're going to take our pencil and we're going to start with the manger. Now, if I were to show you this here for basic shapes, I'm going to be drawing dark so that you can see it on camera. But you're going to be drawing lightly, because remember, when you draw lightly, you can erase your lines if you don't like how they came out. So if I were to show you the basic shapes, you can see that I can trace them very clearly. The donkey's head, the shape of the sheep, even the shape of the manger where Jesus is. So I'm going to move to my final drawing. I'm going to be working on a larger piece of paper so that you can see it. You're going to work on a 9 by 12 piece of paper so that you can hand it off as a larger than normal Christmas card. So I want you to put your paper wider than it is tall and have a pencil and your really good eraser handy. Now what we're going to be doing first, friends, is what's called an underdrawing. We're going to do this card in 2 steps. The underdrawing is with standard pencil, very light lines, but our overdrawing, the finished drawing, will be in colored pencil, including our special treat, the fluorescent pencils. So let's get started with our underdrawing. We're going to start with the manger. So on the lower portion of your drawing, in the foreground, you're going to do 2 horizontal lines, about 1 inch apart. Now the top line is going to be longer than the bottom line. And we're going to make not a rectangle, but a trapezoid. Now remember, I'm drawing darker so that you can see it, but you will keep your lines light. We're going to do another line above these, about 1 inch above and to the right. Now this is going to be the back part of our manger. If I were to connect these lines, you can start to see the manger form. Now a manger is mentioned in Scripture in the book of Luke. In fact, let me get that passage for you. It's Luke 2:6. Have you read Luke 2? That's the Christmas story. We read it every year together as a family. While they were there, this is Mary and Joseph, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now a manger is simply a feeding tray for animals, and it would have been there in the stable. I imagine that Joseph would have patted it with very clean straw first to get ready. So a manger is actually fairly tall. It has legs because you didn't want the animals to go all the way to the ground when they would feed. They would bend their necks and their heads to the feeding tray. So we need to give our manger some legs. So I would just make a big X like this, and then you're going to make additional lines like so. So this is the front end of our manger. So to start with our animals, we have to think in terms of shape for our underdrawing. Underdrawing just gives us our basic shape. So let's start with our friend, the sheep over here. We're going to make an oval about at the top of the manger. There's our oval for the head. In fact, let's make this a ram. Because it's a ram, he'll have horns. So we're going to make a circle coming out of the top of the oval, but stop before you touch the oval. Then make another line that's the inside of the horn and connect the two. Sheep have kind of floppy ears, and they're not too big, so we're going to make some leaf shapes coming out of the oval. Great! Now for our body shape, it's another large oval like this. We know that a sheep doesn't have a body quite like that because sheep have wonderful fur. Let's just make a bumpy wool on the sheep, and then we'll do our triangle legs. Oh, can't forget the tail. Again, bumpy like that. Now, sheep is going to have small eyes and just a little line for the mouth. And there's our sheep. Now, for the basic shape for the donkey, we're going to start higher than the manger and higher than the sheep. And the head shape is really a circle attached to a square. See, a donkey's snout is much shorter than a horse's. So we don't want to leave it quite like that. So we're going to round it out like so. We know that donkeys have very long ears. So at the top of your head, and think of your circle of your head as a clock. Remember, we talked about that in an earlier lesson, that if you try and think of this as a face of a clock, we're going to, right at about 12 o'clock, a nice long ear kind of like elongated, stretched out football shape. And then at about 10 o'clock, between 10 and 9 o'clock, the same thing, another one. So that's our donkey's ears. For the body of the donkey, he's sitting down. The donkey has his hindquarters on the ground. So think in terms of a large oval that's connected to the head shape. But because they're muscular animals, we're going to broaden at the shoulder, so kind of pinch it in the middle and broaden it again at the back. So kind of almost like a little bit of a bean shape, like that. Now the donkey has his legs down on the ground as he's peering into the manger. So we're going to put two long rectangles, but donkey legs aren't too heavy, with a bulge at the knee and a kind of a big triangle for a hoof. Like so. See how dark I'm drawing? Don't draw that dark. Remember, if you need help in keeping your lines light, pull your fingertips back away from the pencil point so you can't use as much pressure, okay? Now I'm drawing dark so that you can see it really well. I want you to draw lightly so that if you need to, you can erase. Now let's get back to our donkey friend. We have his hindquarters here, and so we need to make sure that we have them kind of bent up and then resting down. So I want you to think kind of like a number 3, like so. And donkeys do have kind of a longish tail that has hair on the end. Little different than a horse. A horse has full hair coming right from the body, but a donkey has kind of the bony part of the tail and then hair there. Now let's go up to the face of the donkey. He's looking down at the infant Jesus, and we want to give him his nostrils. So we're going to put a circle there and then a half circle on this side. And his eyes are big and kind of like a football shape. And again, you only see part of it. A little bit of the inside of the ears. Now donkeys do not have a mane like a horse. A horse has beautiful flowing hair for its mane. A donkey mane is like stiff, like a brush. But because that's going to require a lot of pressure, we're not going to do that as part of our underdrawing. We'll put the mane on when we do our coloring in with our color pencils, and that's when you'll use a lot of pressure to create a bristle brush type of mane on the donkey, and that will make it look more like a donkey. Now we have our friend the ox. Now the ox is the largest animal in the stable. Ox is part of the cattle family, and they have very large heads, and he's right over the manger. So to start with that, again, thinking in terms of basic shapes, think in terms of a rounded rectangle. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take that rectangle and we're going to pinch it in about 2/3 of the way down. Pinch it in like that. And then round it out. A small rectangle underneath for the bottom of the mouth. At the top here, let's give our ox his horns. They come out almost as if at the top of the head you're making a giant U, like that. Cattle ears are kind of floppy and large, and they are kind of right under the horns. So think of 2 leaf shapes coming off the side of the rectangle head of the ox. Down here, about the center of this bottom portion of our cow head, we're going to make the nostrils. They're not as wide apart as our donkey, but right at the top of this rectangle you made for the mouth, you're going to do 2 circles with 2 half circles above it. Now cow eyes or cattle eyes are very dark, very large. And so halfway down the head, we're going to make our rounded football-shaped ox eyes. Now since an ox is a large animal, the front portion of the animal, which is mostly behind the manger, is like a large rectangle. You're not going to draw through your donkey. But the back of the ox is a rather bony animal. So at the same level where your ear ended, you're going to make kind of a bumpy line like this, and that's kind of the back end of the ox. And bring it down to the sheep. The tail for the ox is long and bony, so make like a U shape that comes up, and at the end is a fluff of hair. And that's our ox tail. Now, we didn't finish, of course, our manger. We know that baby Jesus is in there. So how are we going to do that? We're looking at the foot of the manger, not from the side. So if I were to use this as an example from our setup here, I'm looking this way at the foot of the manger, not at the side. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. The baby is down in the manger, so right at this top line that you've drawn that shows the back of the manger, you're going to draw an oval. But the oval is going to only be a tiny bit above the line and mostly below the line. About the size of a dime is what I have here, not too big. And that's going to be the baby's head. And then you're simply going to draw a line that connects to this end line of the foot of the manger, and that will be the body of the baby. Now, all we're going to do is very simple little lines to show the baby's face. To show that beautiful baby nose, we're simply doing an upside down U right in the middle. And then for the eyes, real U's to show the closed eyes. And then a little tiny line for a mouth. That's it. Baby Jesus is sleeping. Because Joseph probably would have lined that manger with straw, we're going to put a lot of straw coming in. So how we do that is a bunch of curved lines flowing out over the manger, like this. And because I want to erase a line that I don't need this line anymore, I'm going to have straw coming out. And even above the baby's head, there'll be some straw. So what we're going to be doing now is flushing out this drawing, making it fuller and richer by using color. We're going to start with our color pencils. Now, hopefully your lines are nice and light, so when you use your color pencils over them, the pencil lines won't show through. But that's why you always have your eraser handy. So as you're going along, erasers can erase both color pencil and traditional pencil. So let's start with our friend the sheep. We're going to use white. And because white is so light, I want to make sure that my lines are a little lighter underneath on my underdrawing. So I'm just going to go over with my kneaded eraser a little bit, and then I can really do it. Now it's hard for the white to show up on camera, I get that. Remember, when you use color pencil, friends, you use several layers of light color. So the first layer, you can just get it on really quick. You don't have to be so neat. If you were here with me last time, you remember that. So I'm just going to put on a light layer of white with my color pencil. Notice I'm using the overhand grip, right? Like I'm clutching a monkey bar in the playground, and my finger is on the point so I can apply pressure. And I'm just filling this in to get a light layer of color. Now sometimes when you're using the overhand grip and you're applying pressure, you might break off your point. No worries. Color pencils are just like any other pencil. You can just pop them in the sharpener. And I'm going to grab this little tail here. Now I want to go back and I really want to highlight the bumps of the wool here. So I'm going to go around my pencil, around these curves. Great. All right, I'm going to move on to his head, but you can keep going with your white. I'm going to actually take a black colored pencil. Now you can use your standard pencil, that's fine, but I like the rich dark black of a black colored pencil because we're going to make the face black. But I want to start off lightly. I don't want to get really dark right away, and I'll tell you why. Because I want to make the eyes of the sheep black, totally black. So I'm going to just put this in as a light black. Does that make sense? It's not quite gray, it's just a light black. But I'm going to outline it. See how hard I'm pressing? Almost like coloring book lines in a darker black. Great. And his eye. Then I can go back and I can fill it in and make it even a little darker. Now for his horn, I'm going to use a goldish orange kind of color. That really pops against the white and the black. Now I don't want to forget his little legs, so I'm going to make these kind of woolly too by doing a circular motion with my color pencil. Now the tips are black, and here I'm going to make little triangles that have a split at the bottom, like that, for the little hooves of the sheep. Now the great thing about colored pencil is you can make it darker if you started off lightly, and you can always blend color. Remember, we talked about color blending. So if I wanted to blend in some other colors, say if I wanted to take some gray and put it kind of at the top of the legs to show that they're a little bit in shadow being under his body, or even the bottom part of the sheep, I can blend in just a little. Now we're going to use gray for our friend the donkey. Now we'll be using whatever shade of gray you like. You just want to make sure it shows up on your paper, which is why the paper you choose is so important. Now on my first drawing I had used blue. For this one I'm using kind of a tan, and it'll still show up. But if I keep my lines light as I color with my color pencil, I can adjust the color as I go along. So start with your overhand grip, and you're going to simply fill in kind of all over. It's kind of like a first layer. I just want to quickly get in the color for the donkey, even the ears. Great. Now I can go back in my standard grip, my basic grip, and I can start to make it a little darker. Now here's a tip, friends. When you're using color pencil for something that you know might have more than one color, you can still color over it and then take another pencil, say a pinkish color that for the inside of the donkey ears. I can go right over it. You don't have to avoid it. See, you can go right over it. It blends beautifully. If you don't like the way it blends, you can always erase it out. Okay, so for this other ear, notice I pulled my hands way back so that I'm not applying too much pressure, but I'm using my basic grip so that I can get this donkey ear. And where it connects to the head, I'm going to apply a little more pressure. As you get close to the manger, I want your pressure to get lighter. I'll explain why in a little bit. So the back of this donkey head, I'm going to use a little more pressure, apply a little harder, but as I'm closer to the manger, I'm going to keep it light. Now at the edges, where you already have your underdrawing lines, you can go a little darker. When you're doing scenes like this, where there's some animals and a child, maybe a card that would be great to give to a friend, a child friend, it's okay to create what we call a coloring book look, where the edges are a little darker or outlined. It still makes for a great drawing. Now as I fill in the color for the body, I see that there's spots where, say, there's a leg behind another leg. Now since this one is further away and it's kind of tucked in shadow, it's going to be a little darker, so press a little harder. And down where I get to the hooves, I'm going to use my black pencil and fill that in like that. And there's the back one, kind Now I'm going to do the mane. Remember we talked about the mane of a donkey is more like a stiff brush rather than long and flowing like a horse. So you're going to use a lot of pressure and you're going to make marks that are kind of sticking up like this. A little bit down onto the head, and I'm really pressing dark and I'm going right along the back like a brush, and then I gradually get smaller. And that's what makes it more like a donkey instead of a horse. And we're going to make the donkey's eyes nice and big and dark. And a little bit inside the nostril there. Okay. Because this is in shadow, under here in the body, I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. Now, because his mane is this bristly, dark gray, the end of his tail will be too. Same hair, just a different place. There we go. Let me fill out this bony tail here. We're going to move now on to our ox. For our ox, we're going to be using brown. I would say you can use either a light or a dark brown, whatever you really like. I'm going to be using this darker brown. Now we're going to start the same way we did with our sheep and our donkey, by pulling back so that we're not applying too much pressure, and just a first layer of color, just over the whole thing, like this. Don't forget the ears. Now, the reason we do an underdrawing, my friends, is so that the basic shapes are right before we do the details of our overdrawing with color, because it's really hard to go back and correct the entire thing. So underdrawing is a technique that a lot of artists use, especially if they're going to be doing a painting. They might get their canvas all set up, do an underdrawing first, make sure the proportions and shapes are correct, and then they work on the painting. We're kind of doing the same thing, but with a finished drawing, almost like painting with colored pencils. So here, now that I have covered in with one light layer, this area, now I'm ready to really put in more detail and being careful about the pressure I use so that I can make it lighter and darker where I want. Again, what's closest to the manger is the front of the ox, so I don't want to make that too dark. But I'm going to make the ears a little darker. Notice I've changed to the overhand grip so I can apply a lot more pressure. This is what is furthest away, the top of the head. And as I move closer to the front, I'm going to get a little bit lighter. You know, I'm looking at my ox and I'm thinking, I don't think those eyes are the same size. So I'm going to fix it. And see how quickly I'm able to erase? That's the great thing about pencils and colored pencils. So you can do the same thing, my friends. You can make corrections along the way, but you have to be carefully observing as you're working. Don't get so caught up in coloring in that you lose sight of the details. Okay, so we remember that the front of the cow's head, the ox's head, is wider. And those nostrils with a circle with a semicircle on the top. And because the cow's eyes are very dark, I'm going to take my black pencil and fill those in. There we go. Now as you move down, we're going to get into the body, and most of the body of this ox is behind the manger, so it's not going to be seen as much. But that's okay, we still want to get in the leg detail. I'm going to put a little bit of pink inside the ox's ear. Just a little bit of pink. Okay. Now ox is big, broad, right, muscular animal. We're trying to convey that, but we don't want it to overpower the manger, so I'm going to try and use my color pencil to kind of shape the front of the animal, coming in a little bit towards the manger, probably the front of the body, and the legs are really behind the manger. You're not going to see them. But as I color in back towards the bony part of the ox. I'm going to get a little darker because I'm away from the manger. See, the Christ child in the manger, even the animals knew how special this baby was. And they all wanted to come over and see what was going on. What was there? Why did these people come to their stable that night? One of my favorite Christmas carols is Away in the Manger. That's kind of what we're talking about here. You could say that this is our Away in the Manger drawing. Okay. So I'm just going to make a light coating of brown since the front of the ox is close to the manger. You can continue to color in if you like. I'm going to keep it light for now, but I am going to make the hair at the back of the ox's tail darker and hair shaped. What about those horns? I think I'll use a gray for the ox's horns. And notice I'm coloring in the direction of the horns, so my lines flow that same direction. Now it's time to work on that manger. We're going to start with a basic tan or brown. It was most likely made of wood. That's what was available back then. Probably very rough, not very polished. It was simply a feeding tray for animals. So I'm just going to do a light layer of color pencil, but I will outline the manger in the basic grip because there's such a thing as wood grain, and there is both dark and light in the wood grain, so it's okay to kind of make parts of it dark and parts of it light, our manger. So I'm going to do some lines going across very quickly to make it look like wood. Now, for the baby Jesus part, you can take any color you want to show the baby's face because we're going to do a special step at the end. I just happen to have like a peachy color, but you can use any color for the baby face. It can be tan, brown, dark. We're going to put a special layer on top. For the bundle, just so it can really be seen, it might be cloth that came from Mary's robe. We're just going to make it blue so it'll really pop. And you're going to fill in that little body area. Now here's where we go to our very special tool we're using today, and that's our fluorescent color pencils. So I would say use yellow or orange. Those would be perfect. See, I have those right here. Now some come in this twisting color pencil shape, and I want to follow the lines that we made, the straw lines, right? We said that the straw was going to be flowing over the manger. Now this time I actually am pressing kind of hard because I really want to make sure I fill this whole thing. And I'm going to kind of mix it up. I'm going to use some yellow, some orange, kind of make it like goldish with all this straw all around, flowing over. So I'm mixing the two different color pencils so I get kind of a blended color like this. And I want to get right up close to the baby Jesus' head, flowing out over there because it's straw. I think it might have been pretty comfy. Now I'm going to take a pink fluorescent pencil and I'm going to go over, even though I already have some pencil there, I'm going to go over the baby Jesus' head in the pink and right above it like that. When this shows up under blacklight, friends, it looks amazing. And when they're looking at this Christ child in the manger, they're looking at him in a really special way, just like those paintings we looked at before, because an amazing light comes from the baby Jesus, even from the time he was born. You know, we read about it in the book of John. Jesus even said it. When Jesus was a grown man, he was talking to his disciples. And he said this in John 8:12. When Jesus spoke to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The people were drawn to Jesus because he was the light of the world. And from the very beginning, when he was a baby in the manger, people were drawn to the baby Jesus. The animals were drawn to the baby Jesus. Shepherds came down from their fields after the angel appeared, so excited to see this Messiah who was born. And you know the story of the wise men. They traveled very far, over many miles, to see the baby Jesus. He indeed is the light of the world, and he was so from the very beginning. So that's why we do that special touch at the end for our Christmas card. So now that we've finished the bulk of our drawing, we have a chance to do a special surprise. You can see what it's going to be like. Now, this is a much larger drawing than what you're doing. You're doing a smaller piece of paper, 9 by 12, and I want you to spend more time after we're done refining it. So here's a drawing that I have done before. And you'll notice I spent a little bit more time adding in some shadows, making sure that the color was nice and rich from my color pencils. I want you to do the same thing. You're going to be finishing off your drawing. And then here's the best part, my friends. After we've put in our special touches with our fluorescent pencil, now we all get to see the light of the world. I hope you had fun for our See the Light special Christmas lesson, Away in the Manger. Merry Christmas.